I'm here to do a talk on conversation actions for Google Assistant, which is basically Google Home at the moment, which is the device up here. It's also the Allo device app on your Pixel phones if you've got that. But today we're going to be talking about doing chat bots, for want of a better phrase, for Google Home. So I'm going to be doing live coding. It could go terribly wrong. It went terribly wrong this afternoon when I was putting my slides together. It's nothing like last minute. So fingers crossed it'll all go well here. Actions on Google Home let you build chatbots, as I mentioned, for Google Assistant. And you can develop them today. They're out there and ready now. There's two kinds of actions that you can develop. There's direct actions, which are handled by Google Assistant itself, and you just handle the back-end fulfillment of that particular request. A direct action might be something along the lines of, OK, Google, play Rage Against the Machine.
Sure, here's Rage Against the Machine on Google Play Music.
There we go. Right. So that one was a direct action. It didn't require sort of a conversation to take place. I gave it an instruction. Google responded with Rage Against the Machine. So you can't build direct actions yet. It's still in kind of closed beta, but it's obviously coming at some point further down the line. Now, the reason you're here today, hopefully, apart from the third talk, conversation actions. It's a two-way dialogue with users. So you're going to be asking Google Assistant a question. It's going to be coming back with some answers. You can ask it to refine that question backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. You handle the conversation aspect of that interaction. So you need to parse out from the sentence that you receive all the individual verbs and things and work out what's going on and what the user means and kind of fulfilling that request. It's available today. And an example, I'm going to turn off the microphone because it's going to get really annoying.
Microphone off.
If it responds to everything I say. So you might say, OK, Google, let me talk to Dr. Nick from The Simpsons, if you're a Simpsons fan. And he'll reply, hi, everybody. And you can ask him questions about medical stuff or whatever else you want. So there's a two-way backwards and forwards there with that kind of conversation. When you're thinking about creating a chatbot, or a Google action for Google Assistant, you need to come up with an idea of the persona. You need to kind of embody a kind of a character into this device so that when your users are talking to it, they kind of feel that they're talking to something rather than just a machine. So to that extent, Google provides you with two different voices in sort of two male voices and two female voices, and you can kind of choose between them to kind of differentiate your bot slightly from different ones. But they also have a checklist here, which is kind of maybe a bit small to see, but you can download this off the Google website. I've got the links at the end. And it describes, before you even start coding, things that you want to think about for your chatbot. What are the kind of things it will say? Hi, how are you doing today? What are the kind of things it won't say? Sorry, I can't help you with that. So we're going to come up with a set of phrases that you want your chatbot to kind of embody and kind of follow maybe like core values of your organization or phrases that are typical of your sort of user space or your problem space. A great thing about documenting this early on is it means in sort of larger organizations, as code bases and responsibilities move from one person to another, your persona doesn't change with it. So there's it's like a set of guidelines on how your persona is going to act. And if I'm writing the code one day, it's going to be, hey, how you going, dudes? All this kind of stuff. And somebody else comes along and takes over the code and says, no dudes here. It's all kind of things like that. So your persona is like a guideline of how you kind of write the interactions between the chatbot and the user. So this diagram kind of shows what a typical interaction might look like. So you've got the user on the left. They talk to Google Assistant. There are four little bubbles. That's Google's little logo for Google Assistant. So wherever you see that, you're talking to Google Assistant. So there'll be like an invocation trigger. So, hey, I want to speak to Dr. Nick. And around the top, there'll be some generated dialogue output. So you'll receive, hey, I want to speak to Dr. Nick. You'll come back with a, hello, I'm Dr. Nick. How are you today? What can I help you with? That kind of thing. And then it goes around in a loop. So the user then asks, I'm not feeling so well, my head hurts, whatever it might be. And then you can provide, refinement to the questions, or you can give answers and all this kind of stuff. So it goes round and round in circles, and you manage all of that code yourself. So that's quite tricky. Natural language processing, working out the intents and the verbs and the adjectives and all that kind of stuff. Ain't nobody got time for that. So there's two ways you can do it. The Actions SDK, which is the one that Google provides, which is where you process all the raw stuff yourself. And they've got SDKs for Go and Python, and there's an unofficial one for Java, and there's one for JavaScript. So you can write the sort of natural language processing and pick apart the bits and pieces yourself and plug it into your own kind of rules engines and all that kind of thing. Or you can do what we're going to do today and try and build one using API.ai, which is a sort of a website that lets you build conversational. They describe themselves as a conversational user experience platform. So yeah, we're going to have a go at playing with that today. They've got libraries and built-in bits and pieces already for natural language processing. They can do sort of AI learning and refinement of queries, and you can do debugging in there of your conversation. So it's quite handy to play with. And in the grand scheme of things, this is how it kind of changes the interaction that we saw earlier. So you talk to Google Assistant still, but Google Assistant is now going to talk to API.ai, where you're going to write your sort of rules and your basic processing. And then, same as before, you're going to have this invocation trigger. You're going to generate some output. You're going to receive some input, and you go around and around and around until the user says, thank you very much, I've had enough. So the things we're not going to talk about today, that's going to be showing the code in a second. So the things we're not going to talk about today is stuff that's specific to your business domain. So we're going to get to a point where API.ai is going to send us a JSON document, which is going to have all the different pieces broken down. This is what the user asked. This is the key components of that conversation, and you then will fulfill that on your own server. And you can write a simple Node.js server or App Engine servlet or whatever it might be to parse that JSON document and send back some results from your own database. Maybe you're doing SBS stuff and you want to have lists of TV shows where you can ask the Google Assistant to tell you what time, I don't know, Simpsons is on or whatever, and it will then, you don't do Simpsons, okay. Can't think of a show. But yeah, so we're not going to talk about that bit today because that's fairly straightforward, writing a little back-end server that talks to your database and answers some search kind of queries. We're going to talk about the bit that says, how do I get from a voice input to a sort of a JSON document? So show me the code. All right, let's cross our fingers for the coding deities. And bring up a web browser. Is that all agents? Is that kind of visible at the back? Too small? Just right? I need binoculars. Is it okay? Maybe a bit bigger. That's somewhat better. Yeah. All right, let's go. So you can see my example ones here. Ask Google, they've got a demo one where you can ask Google questions about Google itself and cats. Nurse Andy was my demo that I did this afternoon, so if it all goes horribly wrong, we're going to fall back to that one, but we're going to try and make a duplicate of that, and I'll show you how it all kind of hangs together, and Stubbs is another one I'm playing around with. So, first things first that we need to do is create an agent, and the agent is kind of like the umbrella that everything else is going to sit under. The reason I went with Nurse Andy rather than Dr. Andy, not that there's anything wrong with nurses, but it didn't seem to respond to the word doctor. So I don't know if they've got a thing where they don't like medical chatbots yet, but every time I tried to ask it to talk to my agent and I gave it the name Dr. Andy, wouldn't have a bar of it. So we're going to create a similar kind of thing, a medical app, but we're going to just call it Android Meetup, just because it's easy to say and it gets us where we want to be. And you can tell it what time zone you're in, some other bits and pieces like language. You can add some sample data, which we don't really need to do for this demo, so we can just hit save. Saving. There'll be lots of saving. Every time you change something in API.ai, you have to hit the save button, otherwise it doesn't do anything at all. So you get a default welcome intent. So the intents are the bits and pieces that we're going to build. We're only going to build 2 today. They're fairly straightforward. The default welcome one, as you would imagine, if we click on this, the user says something, and it's going to respond here at the bottom with some generic responses. Hi, hello, good day, greetings. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to build our Dr. Nick. Oops, what have I done there? I went. everything that I wanted to edit. Hang on. Save. Here we go. All right, I deleted the whole thing. So let's get rid of that one and that one. And hello. We'll tweak this one here. So Dr. Nick's going to say, hi, I'm Dr. Nick. What seems to be the problem? Now, there's going to be a whole lot of typos in this today because I'm not going to be typing and speaking and thinking and stuff, so forgive me if I make something wrong. But that's our initial response when you invoke this Dr. Nick agent. That's what he's going to say. So we're going to create another intent now, and this is the one that's going to sort of listen out for the symptoms that we're going to talk to our doctor about. So we're going to give the intent a name, and it might be describe symptoms and some things the user might say. So hopefully you can still read this. They might say, I'm ill, don't feel well, my head hurts. Oops, there you go, there's the first typo. My head hurts, my leg is sore, I banged my toe. So these are the kind of things you might go to your doctor and say. I banged my toe. It's a terrible medical emergency. And for now, we're just going to save that intent. And we're going to tell the agent now about the things that we're interested in those sentences. So we're going to parse out, or we're going to tell it what the entities are that we care about. So we're going to care about things like my head, my leg, and my toe. So we can ask more questions maybe later on about your head, your leg, and your toe. So we're going to go to the Entities tab here, and we're going to create a new entity, and we're going to call it Body Parts. And we're going to give it some examples of the body parts that we're interested in. So we've got leg, and arm, head, toe. And you can create synonyms for these kind of things. So you might say stomach and belly and abdomen and all that kind of thing. So we'll save those. And then we go back to our intent and back to our described symptoms. And now one of the things we should be able to do is click on here and highlight the word toe and then identify that as one of our body parts. There are some built-in entities that you can choose from, sort of street name, first name, last name, location. There's a whole big long list of things that are already pre-programmed, but for our particular domain, we're going to add in this new one that talks about body parts. And I'll talk more about those domains in a second. There's a domains tab, which we'll cover. Yeah, so, oh no, that's the wrong one. Click on leg. Leg is also a body part. Head is a body part as well. So we're going to save those. Now, one of the canned responses we're going to add in at the bottom. So this kind of lets you test the interaction between the voice part and your kind of logic. So we can reference the body part here. See, so I have to think of a sentence. This is where the design part comes in that we talked about earlier with the persona. What might your persona say? So Dr. Nick is a caring kind of doctor, so he's going to say, I'm sorry to hear that body part hurts. Is there anything else that hurts? Add that in, and we hit save. And now in the top right-hand corner, you can see here there's a little try it now button. So we're going to give it a quick debug, see if we get our response that we want. So I might type in my toe sore, and you can see that it's recognized what I've typed in here, and the response that it's generated is from the canned responses below. And where we have the placeholder in my message at the bottom for body parts, it's replaced the body part with the one that was typed in with what the user described. And down here, you can see that it's extracted out the parameter body part and returned the word toe. So if we have a look at the JSON that might then send through, you can see some JSON here. Sorry, yes, you had a quick question?
What if you had two body parts?
We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, so you can see here that the JSON payload that you would receive to your web service or your webhook at the back end, as well as getting the original sentence, you're going to get the broken down parts, and this is where the API.ai stuff really comes in handy because it's going to extract out all those bits and pieces for you. You can then see here we've got body parts equals toe, and then your actual proper web service, which is going to have all the smarts in the back end, can then construct a proper response, based on some medical text rather than just my 3 years of medical school that I failed. So, to answer your question, what if you've got more than one body part? Well, this is good. There's a thing here where it says this is a list, which now means you can specify more than one body part. So if we want to try it now, we might sit there and say, I have a sore toe and head. And we can see down here in the text response, I'm sorry to hear that toe and head hurts. Okay, it's not grammatically correct because it's not built on anything that's particularly smart. But you can see how now it's taken the list and done something with it. And if we have a look at the JSON, you can see here already, you get an array back of body parts there. So you can then do extra bits and pieces with that. So we're not content with just body parts. You can actually make body part a required field. So let's say your Dr. Nick always needs to know what particular body part you're talking about. You can make that required. And then you can define a prompt. So let's say you started the conversation with, I'm ill. Well, let's do that. Okay, so we've made body part a required thing. We're going to give it a prompt. Where does it hurt? Close that. So now if we try our thing, we start off with a generic, I feel unwell. All right, save first. Thank you very much. Yes, always save. Otherwise, it will fail miserably. I feel unwell. We see here that the response, because we've defined body part as a required attribute and we haven't actually specified the body part, it comes back with the question, where does it hurt? And if we say my toe, it then carries on the conversation and then takes it to the next level and says, I'm sorry to hear that your toe hurts. Is there anything else that hurts? Yada, yada, yada. So you can specify lists here. You can make things body parts required. You can kind of see how you can build up a nice little conversation there as well. So in this example, we're going to add in a few extra bits. We're not going to make this required anymore. We'll keep it as a list, and we'll have another option here where we're going to have I feel dizzy and I'm itchy. My leg is bleeding. And we'll go back. So it's already automatically identified leg as a body part in that particular example. We'll go back to entities. I know we've got to hit save, of course. Go back to entities, and we'll just create another quick one here. Might call it symptoms. And we'll have dizzy, sick. So you can construct different parts of your persona and the different kind of conversation items that you're interested in. We can come back to our intent over here. And we can identify bleeding now as a symptom and itchy as a symptom. Well, we hit save. And then in our canned responses further down below, we might be able to have something that references that as well. Dollar symptoms sucks. At least you're Still reading. As you can see, I've got an amazing bedside manner. I should be a doctor. So now we can try, let's hit save. Always hit save. It should be auto-save. Every time you hit return, it should just auto-save. And now we can try, I feel dizzy. And it comes back with the other response. Dizzy sucks, at least you're breathing. What else is wrong? So in theory, because we've asked a question inside our response, I should be able to say, my toe hurts. And it will carry on the conversation backwards and forwards. So you can have multiple things wrong. You can keep going backwards and forwards. And one of the things that this allows you to do is to have a set of required fields that you can prompt over time. You can gather all the information together. And as you're doing that, you'll see this session ID at the bottom of the JSON payload. So you'll be sending bits and pieces backwards and forwards to your back end. So if they say this particular answer to a question, come back with this particular response, and you can tailor that, but you'll have a session ID. And that session ID is the identifier for that particular conversation. So you can store on the server side what questions you've asked so far, what information you've gathered. You can refine the information that you've been given, so on and so forth. And then when you've got enough information to give an answer, that session ID is the bit that's going to hold all of that on your back-end server. And you can kind of go, OK, this is the reference to the conversation. Now I know what the answer to this problem is and come back with the complete solution. So that's how you can tie different questions to different answers and piece it all together. That session ID is the one. So that's a very basic example of our little doctor. Some other bits and pieces to point out before we can try it on here is I'll talk a bit about domains. So as I mentioned, there's a whole lot of built-in API.ai domains. So you can talk about weather, you can talk about flight schedules, you can talk about media like playing stuff and email and from and to addresses, all that kind of thing. So if you want to have a conversation action, if you want to have a conversation agent, that deals with these kind of things, you don't have to go through and build the entities by hand like we just did for toe and head and my belly and all this kind of stuff. You can just reference one of the built-in domains. So you don't have to list every first name that ever existed. You can just say, this is a first name and I want to respond to that particular input. So that's great to get you up to speed quite quickly on parsing this out. We'll jump to integrations in a second. Fulfillment, this is the bit where you enable your the link to your web backend. So this is the URL that's going to receive that JSON payload. So when you're ready to kind of build in the actual smarts of your chatbot, that's the place where you define who's going to respond to the JSON. And integrations. So API.ai is kind of an interface in the phrase that it allows you to plug in your chatbot to different backend, to different sort of client services, one of which is Actions on Google, which is the first one listed here. But at the same time, that Dr. Nick medical student that we've just created, we could turn that into a Facebook Messenger bot, we could turn it into a Slack bot and a Twitter thing and all that kind of stuff just by enabling these different interactions. So your backend service doesn't have to know about the differences between each of those chat bot interfaces. API.ai is going to handle all that for you. Today, we're only interested in Actions on Google. So we're going to come up with, and here's where you get to choose the voice in this little drop list here. So I think I need to type in a name first. So we'll call it, you have to turn it on first. That would help. Invocation name for testing. So we're going to just try Android Meetup tonight because that's to be unique. When you want to publish your chatbot to Google so it becomes publicly available for anybody in the world to say, hey, Dr. Nick, I've got a medical issue. This is the Google project ID that it's going to link to. So on your Google console, you'll create a Google project. You'll upload some images in there. You'll describe it. You'll give some sample invocation strings. You'll put in a little section for the testers because all these things get reviewed by Google. So you give them some sample. These are the questions we're expecting to answer. They actually try out a whole lot of crazy stuff because you get to see the questions that come through to your chatbot from people, so you can refine it later on. I'll show you that in a second. So if you want to do publishing to the real world, that's where you link your Google project ID to your API.ai project. Again, choose the different voices here, 2 male, 2 female. We'll choose male 2 just, no, let's go female 2 just because. And we hit authorize. Knows who I am. So now we should be able to hit preview. And they give you, so if you don't have a Google Home, they're not out here yet, they've got a Google Home web simulator, which is very handy. Hit start, and we have to sign in again, lots of signing in. Here we have on the left-hand side our dialogue. It's not easy to see, there is sort of differences in shape, but we'll type in some stuff and see if this works. Okay, Google, I'd like to talk to Android Meetup, we called it. This is where live coding goes horribly wrong. So boom. Now, is there no volume? Mr. Mitchell? No volume from the HDMI? No? Okay, cool. It speaks to you if you want to hear it. So what seems to be the problem? So we can see, my leg hurts. And it's now going through the rules that we defined earlier. I'm sorry to hear that your leg hurts. Is there anything else that hurts? My head. And then it'll keep going on and on forever and ever. And then we haven't built an action yet that responds to things like no, goodbye, and then that's what closes the conversation. You have to have a close action that lets you sort of shut down your agent. So at the moment it says, oh, sorry, I don't know what that is, because no isn't mapped to a particular action. That's easy enough to kind of set up. We kind of come back here, go back to our intents, new intent, says goodbye, and at the very bottom, it's hidden away because when you expand it, it's actually off the bottom of the screen. You say this one's going to end the conversation, hit save. So now, if the user says goodbye, let's say, is there anything else that hurts? No would be a more logical answer. That's going to end the particular conversation. Let's see if this works over here. We might have to refresh, I can't remember. Okay, yeah, so I'm about to refresh. But you can say, we probably need to put in a text response. Okay, get well soon at the end, and we'll refresh that. So, let's just refresh this a second, because we'll go through one kind of edge case where we type in something that we don't expect, and then we're pretty much done with the awesome thing. This, I might have to hit publish again, I can't remember. Okay, Google. Meetup. Lightning fast as well. Okay, what seems to be the problem? My head hurts. Sorry to hear that, and then we say no. And it should actually understand and give us a farewell response now. Have that close action. Okay, get well soon. So now we've closed the conversation. That's one of the things that when you submit your app, if you don't close the conversation, Google will reject your app and say, sorry, you kind of leave the microphone open at the end of a question and you don't respond to it. So you always have to kind of close the question with some kind of farewell, see you later. And then it goes back to the default persona, which is the Google Home device itself. Now, I don't want to go over time, but one of the things we can do in training is if you receive a description, let's say somebody types in my elbow hurts, and we haven't defined elbow as an entity, here you'll get to see that the failed part of the conversation, and you'll be able to click on the word elbow and then say, actually, elbow is a body part, hit approve, and then in theory, elbow would be added automatically to this list here. And then next time somebody asks, my elbow hurts, it'd be one of the ones in the list. Again, if you're using the built-in domain models that are provided by API AI, hopefully those are all taken care of for you. It's just that in our case, we're talking body parts and they're our kind of thing. Now, moment of truth before we go back to the slides. In fact, let's go back to the slides. Then we're nearly done. Let's give it a go on here, just to see.
Microphone on.
Okay, Google, I want to talk to Android Meetup.
Sure, here's Android Meetup.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nick. What seems to be the problem?
My head hurts.
I'm sorry to hear that head hurts. Is there anything else that hurts?
My leg hurts.
I'm sorry to hear that leg hurts. Is there anything else that hurts?
My elbow hurts.
Android Meetup isn't responding right now.
Okay.
Try again soon.
So because we didn't have the elbow in the list, it kind of got confused, and that's one of the things then kind of falls back to the default, I don't know what you're talking about, edge case, and then the little, I can't remember, Google come up with some clever phrase about the ding that it plays at the end. It's like a, not emoji, it's like an ear-oji. So it's the sound that you hear that you know that something's happened. Anyway, so that's working there.
Microphone off.
And I can demo it on this because this is linked to my account that's linked to API.ai. So I don't need to publish it to the real world. As long as all my accounts are the same account, you can demo it on a sort of a real device. Anyway, a couple of slides left to go. As we talked, here's the JSON payload that you might receive at your webhook back end. I've put in bold the bits that are most important. So my head is bleeding. You get the fact that, you know, the broken down parts, head and bleeding. And then the speech is the bit that comes back from the back-end server. And you can see at the bottom the session ID, hopefully there as well, which is links to all your different requests and responses together. So in review, create your API agent. It's pretty straightforward. We just did it there. Set up your intents, your entities, and some sample requests. You can apply some AI learnings, so you can add in the extra bits and pieces. And if you're using the built-in domain models, a lot of that AI learning is taken care of for you. You can create and deploy your webhook, which is the bit that's actually going to have the business logic smarts, not just the built-in canned responses that we've kind of done for our testing here today. Test it with all the crazy things. What part of your body hurts? Tuesday. See what it says. Just, you know, people will ask it all the kind of crazy stuff. I won't show you some of the things that my Father Christmas bot got asked. It was, yeah, disturbing. You submit it for approval, Google review it, and then if you pass the review, then everybody can download it and use it. If you're after some more information, there's a Google webpage that talks about it. They list all the official SDKs. If you're a Java developer like me, not JavaScript, you'll be interested in the Google Actions Java SDK, but that is for the hardcore people who want to build all the stuff that API.ai does by hand. Crazy. And then there's a great YouTube video that was done at the Google Cloud 17 event 3 weeks ago, I think it might have been. And that's extending Google Assistant with Actions on Google, where they talk specifically about this. They go through a bigger example about a conference app where you can ask it about what sessions are on, what speakers are playing, all that kind of thing. So that's quite good as well. And that's me. I'm assuming there's no questions because this is such a boring topic. The man in the blue shirt. Go, Jason. Oh, microphone.
Oh, hello. Okay, so yes, so I...
Start all your questions with OK Google, and this will answer for you.
No, you turn the microphone off. No, it's okay. So, as you pointed out, I do work for SBS. We have a catalog of about 2,500 programs, and if I wanted to build a chatbot that would respond with TV guide listings, I don't want to type them all in. Is there an API that lets me load all the program names in, for example, into what was it called? The domain into one of the domain listings.
So your question is about, you've got a huge catalog of bits and pieces you want to upload.
Symptoms.
Yeah. So your web backend is the bit that's going to fulfill that. So you don't need to necessarily know about the entities. So you might then offload that request to say, hey, SBS On Demand, what time is the news on? And then you can parse that out and go, okay, and then your back end handles that fulfillment. So you don't necessarily need to upload all the TV shows. I think there is actually...
But I kind of want API.ai to tell me which TV show they're asking about.
Right, okay, yeah. That's, again, one of the domains. I'm not too sure. You can certainly upload bits and pieces. Entities. You might be able to upload entities. There. So upload entities.
There we're talking. Okay.
Yeah, so you can choose a CSV file and boom, away you go.
Okay, cool. If you get some weird responses from something I'm building, don't blame me.
Okay, no worries. Next one was over here. Yeah.
The fulfillment by the backend, is that a one-off thing that happens at the close of the conversation?
Yeah, so whilst you're... So you'll keep getting web requests to your backend for each of the interactions that the user has. And that session ID will be the same for each of those. So in the backend, you can kind of keep a history of the interactions you've had. And then as you build up your response to the point where you go, okay, I know what body part they're talking about. I know what symptoms they've got. Their head is bleeding. Okay, that's enough information to me to say, go and get a bandage and stick a bandage on your head. It's that information that you build up yourself at the back end. So you can ask as many questions as you want until you get to a point where it's like, oh, okay, now I know enough. Thank you very much. Ask no more questions and then come back with an answer.
What role does the backend response?
That's the bit that has the knowledge. So that's the bit that says
the response from the backend. That's not taken into account at all. Like we post to the backend, but the backend responds with it, right?
Yeah. So your backend receives a JSON payload.
Yep.
And then you respond to that request with some JSON. There's like a request and a response part to that. So you then respond with essentially a question or some text that's going to get spoken by the device.
Right.
So that question might be...
While it's gathering information, it's still sending to the backend, right?
Correct. Yeah. So you might sit there and go, I don't feel very well. And you go, well, what hurts? And I say, my head hurts.
That's backend, right? That's within the API.ai.
Yeah, but So the API is going to be, when you hook in a webhook, it's not going to use the canned responses that we typed in. It's then going to offload that to you. So then you come back with responses. So I say I don't feel very well, and then it's going to send your back end, Andy doesn't feel very well, and you go, well, what hurts? And then I send back, oh, my head hurts. And because head is one of the entities, you get a JSON payload that says, Andy says, my head hurts, parameters, body part equals head. You go, brilliant, okay, store that somewhere on the back end. You go, do we know enough to say, go and put a bandage on? No, but we don't know if it's bleeding or if he's got a headache. It might be a bandage or a paracetamol. What are your symptoms? And then, so it kind of goes backwards and forwards so the back end can choose the questions rather than API.ai. So those kind of canned responses don't really get used as soon as you sit there and say, use a webhook. Because the webhook is the bit that's now going to have the smarts, not just my hard-coded 2 responses that we had. I didn't define a webhook. No, so correct. Right. Yeah, so as soon as you define a webhook here, if we turn that bit on, this is where we say, what's the URL? Is there any authentication that's needed? Right. And that's at this point, if I hit save, and it probably won't validate properly. But if I went to go back to my intents now, those responses that we typed into the bottom, they're just going to get ignored. Okay. Because the webhook is now the brains of the operation.
You have to construct a response similar to what it's expected. Okay.
Yeah. So the documentation covers what the JSON payloads look like, and you get samples in the web simulator. It kind of gives you a sample request. So this is the request, and then down here is the response, and this is what it comes back. And then the speech at the bottom there is the bit that actually gets spoken.
That's the bit I was after.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Something I wasn't quite clear on. So there was the direct actions before, and that was kind of you asking it to play a song. Is the direct action just the fact that it immediately responded, or is it that this particular thing can't play music?
Correct. So with a conversation action, you ask the assistant, I want to speak to a persona. So you give the persona a name. It might be Father Christmas, it might be Dr. Nick, whatever it is. And then when you ask to speak to that persona, the persona then takes over, and then it's that point where your code does all the interaction of the conversation and the fulfillment of the questions and the answers. A direct action, there isn't that persona there. It's just the Google Assistant doing that on your behalf. So you can actually send back, I believe, MP3s, and it'll play them on here. So I think the Google one it lets you ask it about cats and Google Mountain View Campus. And one of the questions is, oh, and here's the sound of a cat. And I think one of the URLs is like an MP3 that it will play on the device. So yeah, it's not limited to just text. I think you can send stuff back like that. But the difference between a direct action and a conversation action is when you invoke the conversation action, you actually ask to speak to a thing. Yeah, whether it's Dr. Nick, Father Christmas, SBS On Demand, whatever it might be. The SBS On Demand one will probably be a different one because eventually it'll be a direct action where you go, okay, Google, play the news from SBS On Demand on my Chromecast, and it'll just fulfill that automatically and talk straight to their backend, which is how Netflix works. You can just say, I want to play this movie on my Chromecast from Netflix, and Google Assistant does it all. You don't have to talk to Netflix.
Just out of curiosity, with the direct action you showed at the start, was that your favorite Rage Against the Machine song? Is that why?
No, it just, I don't know what order it picks them up in. It doesn't seem to be particularly logical. But yeah, it always starts on a good one. You can't go wrong with Rage. Oh.
Just about language, is it only English or is it, it could be like French or Spanish?
Good question. It's only available in the US at the moment. So there's a very good chance that it's only in English at the moment. I don't know if there's a payload bit that says whether there's a locale. You can query where the user is. You can ask the device, what location are you in? So you might be able to go, they're in France or they're in Germany, and respond in a particular language. But I don't think, having a quick look down the request, there doesn't seem to be a locale to say, this was a piece of text in French or a different language.
There is a field of ing on the top, I think. Like say
the very
English. I think on top you have where you do the request.
Let's look on this one. It might be there. I say,
yes.
Oh, yeah, language EN.
Language,
So so there may be the ability to do different responses for different languages. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Possibly. Yeah. But again, if you're an English developer sitting in Australia and you receive a request in French, who knows what your code is going to do at that point. Yeah. Not that I've seen. No, I submitted my rather trivial Father Christmas example just in English, and it didn't ask me to support multiple locales or anything. It didn't ask me to even sit there and do a different... A bit like when you do a Google submission for an Android app, you can do a Play Store list in English and French and whatever it might be. This one was just give it some... So there was no different locales for that. Maybe. Yeah, like I say, it's not out worldwide, so I don't see that there would be any particular need for them to support other languages just yet.
I think they said it's German.
Maybe. That's a good enough reason. Oh. Sorry? Oh, so once your app is published, so on your device, on your phone, there's a Google Home app which lets you configure the Google Home device. It lets you link all your accounts to things like Spotify, Google Play Music, Netflix, all those kind of bits and pieces. There is a kind of a browse thing on there where you can go through and see all the other apps that are available, and it gives you like an image, some sample queries, the actual name, all that kind of thing. So you can just browse on the device. This is 100,000 million times better, obviously. I've not played with the other one. I've not played with Amazon Alexa, or what was it? The Echo was the Echo one as well. Echo Dot, yeah. They're probably quite good. I don't know.